let's start with the visual. And when we think about visual, I love this quote, that the way you stand is the way you stand in the world. And of course, you can take that many ways. But let's take it from the posture standpoint. And what I'd like everybody to do is just stand up. If you've finished eating your lunch, stand up and think about how you're standing. And look around the room at other people and see how they're standing. Right? And who looks confident? Who looks, you don't have to answer this question, who looks confident? Who looks unsure of themselves? Who looks nervous? What are things we do with our hands that may make us look nervous and we don't even realize it? And now I want you to take a moment, and we'll talk about the hands in a few minutes. Now I want you to take a moment to grow an inch taller. Some of you say, how could I do that? Please tell me. Right? So grow an inch taller. And what are you doing to grow an inch taller? And your shoulders go back. Right. Well, take a deep breath. All right. You stretch and think about how much more powerful. Everybody look around the room at other people now. And everybody looks more powerful because you're standing with more confidence. And so one part of it is, this is not confident, right? This is not confident. But standing up with your shoulders back, imagining that you're a marionette on the string, is going to make you look more confident. And so if you walk into a room that way, you're going to exude more confidence. If you get up and talk at a meeting that way, you're going to exude confidence. So everybody can take a seat now. So let's look at some of the standing posture, because I know it's hard for everybody to see everyone in this room, and I'm going to give you some examples. It's a familiar face. Different hairstyle, but familiar face. Of these postures, there's no right answer here. There are some maybe wrong. There's some that we don't like, but there's no right and wrong, because again, just like beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, your perception may be different from somebody else's on who's confident and who isn't. But there's some things I'd like to talk about that I think of as more gold standards and things to make sure you're doing or make sure you're not doing. And so if you're looking to see who the most confident looking person is here, and there could be more than one answer, how many of you think it's number one? Okay. How many think it's number two? All right. What about number three? Okay, you recognize that one, okay. And what about number four? Okay, and again, it depends the setting. If you're in a small networking group and somebody's walking around like this, you're not going to think that they're the best. You know, maybe they're overly confident, right? And that's not really what you're looking for. So the setting is important as well. Keep that in mind. But the way I look at it, number one, and women tend to do this more than men, especially women wearing heels. You're at an event and you just don't feel real comfortable standing there, so you maybe cross your legs. And it's just easier maybe to balance that way, but you clearly don't look as confident as if your legs are apart, maybe 6 inches apart. So I would say that's not one that we would shoot for. Number two, there your legs, you look confident. One leg could be in front of the other. But I'll warn you of one thing, especially women. And that's if you stand there with your hip out, right, it doesn't look as powerful as if you stand up. I'm going to make all of you so self-conscious when you leave this room today. All right, number three, who watches Shark Tank? Anybody watch Shark Tank? Okay, this is a very common posture when we're nervous, right? What do we do with our hands? I might as well hold on to myself and comfort myself. But to me, it's a giveaway right away, and you see it a lot when people are pitching on Shark Tank, how nervous they are, understandably so, but your body posture is giving you away. So some of the things with visual is fake it. Fake it until you become it. And some people think that's that's not at all authentic. And I truly believe that if you stand with confidence, and some of you may know Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, we can talk, and it's been, the details are not, the research has been disputed. But regardless, the posture, a powerful posture will make you feel powerful. It does not change the chemistry in your brain like she claimed. That has not been replicated. But posture is important. So let's cross that one out. And then this one, again, if your arms are away from your body, you seem much more confident than somebody who's standing there with the arms close. So these are just some things to think about. Now we have a seated posture, because sometimes you're just sitting at meetings, right? And how are you sitting? So you can sit in a meeting and look around the room, and you can pick up a lot, like who's the person in charge, who's the person who doesn't care so much, who's the person who's intimidated. A lot of that's picked up before anybody opens their mouth. And so in this case, which do you think is if you were hiring somebody to work in your department, who's the one, and again, settings are everything, but who's the one you're going to choose? How many would choose number one? Okay. How many would choose number two? Okay. And how many would choose number three? Okay, so that's like a 50-50 switch. Number one, the biggest rule many of you have heard, don't cross your arms. Now, you may be cold, right? You may be cold, and that may be a reason, but people may not realize that, and they're going to perceive that as being closed off. And for the life of me, I don't understand why all the CEO pictures on websites are like this. So it's power, but it's closed off power, like, I don't need anybody else. I'm pretty good with myself, right? Whereas to me, this would be a better posture. But who am I to say, right? And then number two, she looks very friendly, but she's very small. She's making herself small. And women tend to do this, and a lot of my international clients from different cultures do this. They'll sit in a chair and they make themselves smaller. And by making themselves smaller, they don't look like they have much power. They don't look like the leader in the room or the confident person. So I'm not saying spread out on at the table when you have a meeting, but you know those people, right? You've been at those meetings. But take up space. And this may be a little exaggerated, like she's ready to leap off the chair. But the point is, if you take up space, you look more comfortable. If your hands are in view on the table, you look more comfortable than hiding your hands below the table. So think about this at your next meeting. You're going to look around and be so self-conscious. And believe me, when I go to networking meetings and people have heard my talks, I really think about this because I think, oh my goodness, I really feel like leaning against this. But I know people are watching, right? People are always watching us, no matter where we are. If we're waiting for an interview or if we're having a meeting, people are watching us, and we're sending out unbelievable amounts of signals just by the way we're carrying ourselves. So I'm just crossing these two off just as a reminder, but I think three is probably the most powerful person who takes up space. And then we talk about head position. And you're saying, really? Are you really going to go that far? And again, we have thousands of facial expressions that can be analyzed, and we may have rules about it. The point is we look at clusters of body language. So you may do one thing that looks insecure, something else that looks powerful. It doesn't always mean that, yep, that person is not sure of themselves. But we tend to look at patterns. What do you think when you see this person with their chin up? What about the personality of that person? What do you think? Any comments? Defensive? Yes, Jen?
Better than you.
Better than you. I'm looking down on you. I'm better. All right? So it's often a position of you think you're powerful, right? It borders on arrogance, too, if you're doing that. And again, I have an interview series coming out. I interviewed somebody who's getting his PhD in social psychology, happens to be my nephew, and he studies this. And we were talking about it. You can show prestige and arrogance with your head position. And so you have to be real careful how you show that. What about the chin down? What do you think about that? Submissive. Who said that? Yes, submissive. And I thought submissive. And the interesting thing is my nephew said to me, nope, chin down is aggressive. It's like, really? That doesn't look aggressive. Because, he told me, because the eyes were looking up. So it looks a little more submissive. Like a famous person did. Does anybody know a famous female who used to look down? Her head chin was down, but her eyes were up. In England? Princess Diana? All right, that was her pose. So here you took a powerful person, she put her head down and looked up, and she was more endearing. So I don't know that it has to be aggressive. Again, it's not just if you go this way, it means something, this way means something else. But we're reading the body language, and we're forming impressions. What about the head tilt?
It was friendlier on
Friendlier, relaxed, casual, right? Looks like she's listening. Oh, I'm glad you said that. Okay, I'll tell you a story about that real quickly. To me, I think that's a weaker posture. That's okay. And my son was in the startup world, and when I told him a head tilt isn't very powerful, and he said, oh, no, I use that head tilt. Why do you use the head tilt? He said, well, I use the head tilt when I'm speaking to the people I want money from. And when they're talking, you better believe I don't want that powerful position. I'm listening. And I said, okay, that's fine. That's what he thinks. So I gave a workshop at a law firm. And there was one person, a real naysayer, one of the senior partners, like, he doesn't need to know anything about body language. And I said, what do you think about the head tilt? And right away he piped in, he goes, that's my listening posture. And it's like, really? He said, yes, when my clients are talking to me, if I tilt my head, I'm listening more. And so we may choose to have less powerful positions in different situations. So keep that in mind. Nothing is better than the other. My goal for you is to be mindful about the different ways that you're sending out messages, and sometimes use the weaker ones because then it's appropriate in that situation. And then, of course, the fourth one is just neutral. But neutral could be like, all right, there's nothing going on there. They're just being neutral. Another thing with body language to think about is sometimes we do mirror what somebody else is doing. So if they're in an awkward position, we may choose to do the same thing to connect with them. So I'm not saying don't ever do it. I'm just saying be aware. Be aware of what you're communicating. And this is an example of how you can communicate with your head position.
So how you doing?
Great, it's great. How have you been?
Oh, well, obviously, Barbara and I split up. Otherwise, we would have done the head tilt.
The head tilt?
Yeah, but since the divorce, when anybody asks me how I am, it's always with a sympathetic head tilt. How you doing?
I'm sorry.
No. It's fine, believe me, I do it too. I always answer with the I'm okay head up. I'm okay. Sure. Yeah, I'm fine.
So we communicate a lot by just how we use our heads and our bodies. All right, then it gets to facial expressions. Oh my goodness, they can give us away, right? So somebody said to me, I should always smile. And they worked at the front desk of a company, of an agency, and the person in the workshop said to me, sometimes people come up to me and they're all upset about something that just happened. Do I have to smile? And I said, no, you want to smile when it's appropriate to a situation, but if somebody's crying or upset, or you're firing somebody, the smile isn't appropriate, and then you're not sincere. And you know those people. You know those people who feel like they're supposed to smile, so they're smiling no matter what they're talking about, and you're saying there's no connection with how they look and what they're saying, and so how credible are they as a person? And so our facial expression should be revealing, if it's positive, our emotions, or if we want to connect with people. So it's not just about put a smile on. And then the hands. Everybody says to me, what do you do with the hands? Any thoughts what you should do with your hands? Any ideas? Use them. Use them. Well, what should you do with them? Where should they be when you're talking? Any thoughts? So what does that say? So you sit in a meeting, and your hands are back like this. What is that saying to everybody in the room? What's that?
That's a big one.
Yeah, what's a big one? What is that communicating?
Nervous.
Could be nervous. It could be,
Unsure.
I don't know why I'm here. It could be,
I think it's confidence.
It could be confidence. I like, oh, I'm so important here. It doesn't matter how I sit or what I do because I'm in charge, right? So again, it may not always mean the same thing to everybody, but it's certainly saying something. So what do? Well, let's take a look at some. How's that? All right. So if you're talking like this, chances are people think, well, maybe she's lying. That's what some research says. It may be that I broke my tooth, or I think I have spinach in my teeth, or maybe I have bad breath, and I feel real uncomfortable, but just think what that listener is going to think of me. So don't talk with your hands in front of your face. Never point. There are people in politics who may point. Pointing is so accusatory. Now, if you want to make a point, doing it this way doesn't feel as punitive if I'm doing that. But pointing a finger is I definitely recommend you're staying away from that. This person just probably so tired or maybe stressed and is trying to comfort themselves, and maybe you've had so many meetings that day and you just had one more meeting. You're revealing a lot by just using your hands that way and just trying to comfort yourself. Okay, so if I got up to talk, I may be excited to talk about you, but if my hands stay this way, I'm not going to look real comfortable. In fact, I may look a little bit nervous because I'm holding on. And for those of you who start a talk like this, you get so comfortable holding on that you don't ever let go, right? So once you're there, I'm real comfortable, let's not worry, and then you don't gesture. So I wouldn't hold your hands, maybe put one hand over the other, but don't interlock them because once they're there, you don't want to leave. The same idea. Okay, that person obviously looks very nervous. It helps that her eyes are popping out. Here's somebody who's making an attempt to use gestures. But to me, she looks like, do you know when somebody stands behind you and they do the arms and you're doing the body? She doesn't look natural because her elbows aren't leaving her body. So remember, just let there be some space. Move away from your torso. And finally, and I'd say especially for men, the hand in the pocket. Many people are comfortable doing it because it's comforting just to have a hand because I don't know what to do with my hands, so at least one hand's taken care of. But you don't gesture that way. If you have one hand in the pocket, you're just gesturing one hand, and it doesn't seem that natural. If you have keys or a change in your pocket, you're going to tend to play with whatever's there. And so there were stories where somebody would say, you know what, I'll give you $10 for all the change in your pocket, because that person is talking the whole time and jingling change around. Right? So take your hands out of your pocket. You'll be a more animated speaker as soon as you do so. Are there any other questions about the visual or things that I didn't cover for you? Anybody have any questions? So again, think about, did you have a question?
I think you were going to cover attire.
Oh, should we? Oh, attire? I'm not going to cover attire today because I'm really talking about speaking and communication. But what I will say is you certainly want to dress in a professional manner. Know your audience, but if you're the speaker, be a little step above them. If you're way above them, if I came in a corporate suit today, right, dressed real corporate, you're not going to connect with me. You're going to say, boy, she didn't know the audience, or I have nothing to do with what she's talking about. So know your audience. Just like you cater what you say to them, think about how you dress and make that appropriate. And wear something you're comfortable with, but somewhat professional. There was another question.
Can you over-gesture? Yes.
Can you over-gesture? Yes. Oh, I'm glad you said that.
And how do you stop yourself?
Thank you for saying that. I meant, how do you stop yourself? What's wrong with using a lot of gestures, right? And I'll tell you what I really believe is distracting about it. If I'm talking like this all the time, and I just say, well, it's just my culture, we just use our hands a lot, and I'm very expressive, and it drives you crazy. The constant repetitive gesture is what gets annoying, right, if I'm doing the same thing. But here's a trick. I truly believe it's the fingers, the wild dancing fingers that are annoying. Because if I were very expressive like this, it wouldn't bother you as much if I'm doing that, because my fingers aren't all over the place. And so I don't think that it's a problem that you're gesturing a lot, it's just how wild do you look when you're gesturing, all right? And typically our gestures are within our body, within our torso, right? So if I'm gesturing up here a lot, that's not appropriate unless I have 100 people in the room. And I may have more exaggerated gestures here than I would if I was talking to David on a one-to-one, because he'd think, what is she doing that she's so expressive, right? So you have to know what your audience is, but I don't think it's too much gesturing unless it's all over the place, above your head, all the way out, taking up so much space, or if it's the wild dancing fingers. Does that answer the question? I try it. Don't do it this way, because I work with some people and then they start gesturing like this. But think about your fingers staying together. And let me give you an example without getting it all political, all right? So we look at when Trump communicates, you see the fingers and a lot of chaos. And when Obama would communicate, you always saw that the fingers were together and more measured. And so it's a different style, a different personality, and it makes you feel a different way. And so much of that is just your body language and your use of hands. All right, so it's a lot to think about. There'll be more questions. And there's no one right answer. One thing I will mention, some people say, why don't I just stand like this? Well, that's very military looking, right? When I've worked with the Army, that's what they're supposed to do when they give a presentation. And when somebody says, well, why don't I just stand like this? This looks very defensive, right? The only time I see people standing like this where it's somewhat appropriate is in a soccer game, right? Right. But that's very defensive, right? But why would you talk in a meeting with your hands like this all the time? And then some people say, what do I do with my hands? Should I hold them up here? And I say, it's okay to keep them at mid-torso. Maybe keep them together. Not like this, but let them be together so that they can come apart. You know, and you could also do this, which is Kevin O'Leary's power pose, and it's considered a power pose up here. You can do it because then your hands can come away, but I wouldn't be obnoxious with it, right, and just putting it up there, because it is considered a power posture.